Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Hagan, and this is another episode of Nxt In Sales. I am so excited to introduce you guys to my guest today. I have Anthony Palladino, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at mabl. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining me today. How's it going?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks. Appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's going great. Thank you.
Great. Well, obviously, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, but I'd love if you could give a little bit of background on yourself,
Sure.
just so our viewers can get to know you before we dive right in.
Absolutely. Yeah. My name is Anthony, and I am the CRO today at mabl. I've been in sales leadership and different capacities and field leadership for about 20 years. And I'm an investor and advisor of a small venture capital firm, in addition to my operating responsibilities. So having a lot of fun in the market.
Awesome. Well, to dive right in, Anthony, you've been in sales for quite some time. So, I'm sure you've learned tons of lessons over the years, but maybe a place to start would be, what do you wish that you had known when you started your sales career that you know now, and when and how did you learn that lesson?
Yeah, I've learned so many lessons, and I keep learning them. And I've lost so much hair, as you can see. And I don't have any back to learn, but I have a bunch of scars because I've made almost every mistake I think that there is. But it's a journey, right? It's something you continue to learn all the time, and that's part of the fun of it. And I think
Absolutely.
in any capacity. But one of the things that I learned probably about 2011 or 2012 was the ability to process subconsciously. So, and that is, I'm a big believer, and some people may find this a bit hokey, but for me, it's really something that I think is really important and critical when you're developing as a person and you're developing as a leader. And I think that's the ability to be able to synthesize all the things that are coming at you consciously. You're taking in data, you're taking in your gut, you're taking in your belly, you're taking in what your stomach is feeling, what your brain is telling you, and you're letting all those things happen in your body, and then you're figuring out a way to process when you're not thinking about it. A lot of times there's ways. This is something that Ray Dalio talks about in meditation. A lot of other people talk about in different versions, but there's certain ways you can wire your brain to let it process, because the reality is it is always processing. You're getting millions and millions of signals per second, and it's a matter of being able to listen to what your body is really telling you. So for me, it's being able to listen to that, because it'll happen sometimes in weird ways. I'll get an answer to a question, something will come up, I'm not even thinking about it, it just pops into my head, and that's that intuition. You might call it intuition. There's a lot of different names for it, but it's really being able to learn how to process subconsciously and figure out and see things that aren't apparent, aren't on the surface. And I think a lot of times they come to decisions, come to conclusions way before they actually present themselves. And it's a matter of just being able to listen to that. So that was, I think, a really valuable thing for me as a leader in growing and as a person.
Yeah, well, because when you think about it, when you're on a sales call, every client is different, and you're intaking so much information about what their needs are and what their problems are and where they want to get to. And you have to be able to take all of that in at once and then formulate a solution for them really on the spot. And that can take a lot of practice.
Yeah. It can take a lot of practice. And I think, if you figure out how to play in your own natural energy, and you figure out when you learn certain things that are structured, but then you commit to them, you synthesize them, you make them part of your DNA, and then you develop the good structure, the good foundational knowledge of what product you're selling or company you're representing or situation you're in. Then you can let all of your other senses play. And then that really improves your ability to, I think, connect with people, and improves your effectiveness as a communicator. One of the things that I often say to teams is most of our audiences are not, they're either professional technologists or they have certain domain expertise there, but they're not professional communicators. And as salespeople, as go-to-market professionals, marketing, sales, customer success, anything touching a customer support, you have to be a professional communicator. And being a professional communicator is knowing your business, but then being able to be present and process with everything that's happening. And you have to really have a good level of confidence in that. And then you have to know your environment. But when you can process subconsciously, you don't have to think arduously about it. It's natural. And the audience, in my opinion, always responds to when you're being natural. So there's
absolutely.
I think relation.
I think that there's a level of trust that gets built when you're able to think on your feet like that. And, that's just so important when you're talking about sales. Marketing is building client customer trust.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is, I think customers, one of the things that sometimes we're digressing, but one of the things that people talk about is driving the sales process. And salespeople, you're not really driving the sales process. You're facilitating the customer's buying process. And in order to do that, customers and prospects, they could do 60, 70+% of the research on their own. There's so much access to information. There's so many back channel communications. So you're not the first person giving them information about something. You have to do it in an incredible way. You have to meet them in that way. And in order to build credibility, in order to build trust with the audience, you have to be able to be yourself and create that connection. And, for me, all of my processes that I develop in companies I'm operating in or I'm involved in some way, it's all about champion-based selling. And a champion's a person with political respect and or technical authority who fights for you when you're not there. And customers become champions along two lines. They have a logical and a rational, a logical and an emotional kind of process they do. And some people, the old expression, people buy with emotion and justify with logic.
Right.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if they buy with emotion and justify with logic. I do know that they might buy with logic and then justify with emotion, one way or the other. Both of those things need to happen, and champions need to have that emotional confidence and the logical validation. And I don't know which one comes first. I really don't. I can give it for both, but they both absolutely have to be there. And trust is a really critical element of doing that. And you can't build trust unless people know that you're being yourself.
Exactly. Well, and, kind of segueing into another realm, you've obviously helped build out a ton of teams. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think are the biggest pain points that hiring managers are seeing in today's market in sales?
Yeah, it's a great question. The market has changed so much in the past, I would say, year, and before that 2 years, and before that from 2 years to maybe 10 years prior, it didn't change as much. But in the past 2 years, it's changed a ton from 10 years ago. And in the past year, and the past 6 months, it's even changed a lot. So the go-to-market processes are different. I mean, I've been doing this a while at Splunk. I was there leading Americas, but I was there pre-IPO for $1 billion in revenue. We were selling perpetual software. The attitude towards perpetual software and the way that finance treats that's very different from subscription software. So, and it's changed some of the ways that you need to think about the type of people in the organization that you bring in. So to kind of give you a specific question or answer your question, one more thought, and I'll give you a couple list of a couple of things.
Perfect.
I think that everything that we're doing is contextual and temporal. Everything that we do in a go-to-market process has to do with the market, has to do with the audience, the buyers, the competitors, the variables that the customers are affecting them, as well as the value that the product can bring. So with that in mind, it's really, really important to know as a hiring manager what you need in the person that you're bringing on. So a company that is an established company, 100 million, 300 million, $100 million, it's a very different set of skills from someone who's pre-product market fit or early stage product.
Absolutely.
$10 million in revenue versus 50 or 100 million. There are different skills that you need. So I think the first thing is really knowing what to look for. What are the characteristics of the person? Are you going to be doing a lot of prospecting? Are you going to be doing a lot of upselling and cross-selling? Are you going to be doing a lot of landing? And what's the sales cycle? What's the time of the sales cycle?
Yeah.
So it's really important to know what is the profile, what are the characteristics that make someone successful in that job. And early company stage, it's really hard because you're making some jumps about what customer buying journey is going to look like, about what the sales process is going to be. If you haven't defined that, it's hard to define a sales process, because if you haven't done it with the product, because again, it's contextual and temporal. Every time I involve with a company, I create a new sales process. And that's not because I don't know what sales process to use. It's because it has to be based for that company and time. So the first piece is knowing what that person needs to look at. The second piece a sales manager needs to do is really be able to ascertain the fit for the current role. So there are certain characteristics that I look at about history and past and sophistication of the previous experience compared to the new experience. Did the person have a demonstrated example of learning in industry A, industry B? How long were they in the roles? What kind of progression did they have in the role? And really just being honest about what is the right fit. Because I'm not a believer that there's an A or a B salesperson or C. It's not simple. It's a lot more sophisticated to see what's the person, what can the person do for this role at this time, and make sure that as a hiring manager, it's really important to make sure that you put the right people in the job who will be successful. It's important for the hiring manager so that you could drive a good productivity model and have good predictability, but it's even more important for the candidate, because the worst thing to happen is that the candidate gets in the job, and then over a certain period of time, the candidate says, hey, this isn't a good thing for me. The candidate's not successful. They didn't make money. Maybe they have to move on in a way that no one was anticipating. That's not fun for anybody. It's bad for the company, but it's even worse for the candidate. So it's really important to do that. The third thing, which is related to all these, is really identifying what's fun for the candidate and the job, and making sure that linkage is there. Making sure it doesn't have to be 100%, but it has to be 60 or 70. And you have to be really honest about what the job is and what the person really gets fulfillment from. And that's not always an easy thing to figure out, because a lot of times candidates are playing for the job. They want to get the job. They want to get the offer.
Yeah.
It's a great thing. They want to as well. But as a hiring manager, I think it's really important to create a really good dialogue, be really open, be really honest. So what the job is and what's fun for the person. You bring those three things together, then you focus on the ramp, which is a whole different story. But then you have a good high predictability for the person to be successful and be a great contributor. And then you can promote them and develop them. And then they could go on and bring on more people. Then that's a lot of fun. But it's a hard thing to do.
Well, yeah. And I mean, from a hiring standpoint, from an agency standpoint, those are things that we're constantly thinking about. I'm like, what was the deal size of your average deal when you were working at your previous company? Because if you were doing deals that were maybe $10,000, you making the jump to something that's as big as like $100,000 to $500,000 is going to be really difficult. And same thing with industries, who you're selling to, and what the purpose of the product is. Every seller is going to be able to do their own thing differently, and what works for one is not going to work for another.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you need, that's part of the job as a sales leadership team, is to make sure you're defining what that process is to drive those deals and how to drive that cycle. And you're really spending a lot of time enabling people to do that. But as part of the hiring process, you need to really test that out. You need to put them in a situation of what the job is. So in my hiring processes, I do quite a few different types of role plays, and the role plays have shifted over the years based on the type of company and the industry that it's in and the type of sale and type of audience that we're driving. But it's really important that you're putting those things out there as a hiring manager, and you're spending the time with the candidate to really vet that it's going to be fun and fulfilling for them.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm curious and kind of selfishly asking this question. I don't know if you've worked with agencies before, but in your experience, when does it make sense to bring on an agency to help support your hiring?
I've worked with some agencies. I've hired some agencies, and there are some great folks. I know, Anna, you guys do a great job as well. And I think having a recruiting partner is really, really valuable. So for me, it's less about when to do it and more about the scale at which you need to do it. So if you're in a position in which you've got really good product market fit, you've got good productivity metrics, and it's time to hire really aggressively, you have a window to do that. That's a really good time to leverage an agency to help you bring in a lot of people over a short period of time to capture that window. I think really good agencies will work with you early on as you're trying to figure out what is the right role, what is the right time, and these are the things that you're talking about here. You guys, I think, do naturally. So,
Yeah.
And you can not only bring the agency in when you need to make massive hiring pushes, but just as a good partner throughout. I think
100%.
a good partner in that is really important. Your network will take you, but for me, as I mentioned, I've been doing this a little bit of time. There are a lot of folks I worked with very early in my career who are retired. There are folks I worked with very early in my career who are great at their job, but it's temporal, it's contextual. They were a certain element of, a certain scale of the company, a certain job they were doing, and it might not play at the new company. It's a different size.
Right.
It's a different size scale. So my point is, your network will only take you so far. And when you have a really good partner, then they can get into a whole different network that you don't know about, and your network is only going to be so applicable for the job. I've seen people say, "Oh, we're bringing the band back together," and that's not that. You can't recreate the past. You have to figure out what's the right thing to do now. Now, that said, I've worked with a lot. I just hired 2 leaders here at mabl. I've worked with at some companies in the past, and we're hiring some more folks. But sometimes, my teams, I create new teams all the time, and they become great relationships and folks, and we plug them in where we can. But not everybody who I know who's awesome is going to fit the next job. So an agency gives you an ability to get a much broader net, so you can really get a great diverse talent pool, and that's super important.
Absolutely. I love that you see the value in that, and
100%.
love to hear it. And you mentioned before, you've obviously helped build out a ton of different hiring processes across different industries and sales. And so I'm a little curious, do you have a favorite interview question that you like to ask candidates? And what does the answer to that question tell you?
Yeah, there is a question I ask, and I ask the question for just about anyone that I'm engaging in any role at any time on my team, or if there are folks I'm interviewing for other people's team, I still ask the same question. And the question is this: when going back to college, what was your GPA that you graduated from school with, and was that good for you at the time? So, and there's a couple different reasons that I ask that. I'm not necessarily always looking for the highest GPA.
Right.
3.8 is not better than a 3.3, for example. But the GPA tells me a lot about the person. So, for example, if someone says, "Well, it was about a 3.0, and was it good?" And was it good for you at the time? "Oh, it was great. Yeah, I had a great time in college, and it was good." Or they say, "Well, it was about a 2.8, and okay, was it good for you at the time?" And the answer on that, if people say it's about a 3.0, it's probably not a 3.0. It's probably more like a 2.8 or something like that. If it's about a 2.8 or something, and they might say, "Hey, look, I was immature when I went to college. Freshman year, I was, had a bunch of freedom, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So then I had to dig myself out of a hole, and I finished at about a 3.0. But that was really good because I did such a bad job, and I had to learn. In my second semester, my last year, senior year, I got 4.0, right? So that tells the story. Other people might say, "Hey, I got a 2.8, and it was good for me." And why? Well, it was good. And, I had a lot of fun. And here's the correlation: if people think that a 2.8 or a 3.0 is good, what I've seen is that their view of themselves, their competitiveness, and their performance will model that. A 2.8 is not a great GPA, right? But unless they've had some type of thing that said 2.8, but here's why and here's what happened. And I went to grad school and I changed. They had unless they've had a cathartic moment, their performance will model, an average performance, in my experience in the career. Now, the other side of that is I've asked people the question. They said, "Well, it was only like a 3.71," and I'm like, "Oh, really? Was that good for you?" Well, and then 20 minutes later, the person's still going. Before with a person, I'm not going to say her name, but she's a really, really amazing leader, a great person, and just a great coach, a great citizen. But the reality of her situation, she had it's a 3.7 or something like that. But she got a C in one course. It was the only thing. I think the lowest she had gotten is a B+ ever. But she had a C, and she was still upset about it 20 years later. So, but the point is not that she got the C. The point is not that she was upset about it. The point is she was refusing to accept something that was a reflection of her that wasn't good. Her standards were like this, and
Yeah.
her performance was like this, and her standards for her people were like this. So it's less about what the number is, and it's more about your view of yourself and what you think good really is.
Right.
And
It's how you set your standards for yourself. If you know that you can achieve better and you didn't get to achieve better, then, you're probably frustrated by that.
yeah, and if you care, you are frustrated by that. But if you don't care and you aren't that competitive and you don't have that high of expectation for yourself and you're not driving yourself in that way, it's going to be tough to be in a field position that has a high degree of accountability, a high degree of competitiveness just in yourself, and a high degree of delta between average work and exceptional work. It's going to be hard to do really well unless you have those high expectations for yourself. So
Right.
it's a funny question. A lot of times people are like, I had an interview with a person today, and he had a 3.5 or 3.6, and I said, well, hey, was that good for you? And he said, well, I was ahead of I was an assistant director. I was the head RA in my group. I played a college sport for 4 years. I was managing a fund as part of the business school program. So I did a lot, and I graduated with a 3.5 or 3.6, but it was pretty good given everything I was doing. And you know what? It makes a lot of sense to me, because even if
Definitely.
to manage that type of activity and still have a good grade and still have an awareness of what that is, tells me this person can manage multiple things and still know what the expectations are and achieve against it. So he's a person I'm recommending we hire now. So, but if he had told me a 3.3 and still had that expectation, that was good. But if he told me, if he had a different expectation on himself, and that's what it comes down to. It's just such a self-reflective approach, and
Right.
how your awareness of yourself and awareness of who you are and what fulfills you and what you want to become.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm interested to know, you've seen a lot of people get leveled up into sales leadership over the years, and I'm curious what you think is maybe the most important trait that any sales leader would need to possess in order to be successful.
So I'm gonna answer you with three things, Anna. So I'm sorry. The one is hard, so I'm gonna give you three.
That's fair.
So I think the first thing for me is listening and the ability to build credibility and respect with your team. So I don't look at leaders as leading from a position of authority. Leaders have authority because they're in a position where you report to me. It's organizationally, hierarchically, they have authority, but I never want them to lead through authority. I want them to lead through credibility and respect. Because when you have credibility and respect with your people, then they're open to you. They will follow you, and they'll come to you with saying, hey, Mr. or, Anna, or hey, Anthony, I had a great day. Here's what I did. Let me share with you. I'm going to share with the team. Their intentions are good and they're sincere, and they know you're going to take that and share with other people. Or they may come to us and say, hey, I had a bad day. Why'd you have a bad day? Well, I did this and it failed. I did this and it failed. I was prospecting and I had a hard time. I don't know what to do. If you have credibility and respect, you have that conversation. You know what? That's such an awesome opportunity to help a person in a new way, because they're coming to you emotionally. They're vulnerable. They're saying, you have my credibility. You have my respect. I trust that your intentions are sincere. I want you to help me do this. And as a leader, that's how you help people become versions of themselves that they either wanted to become or they didn't even know that they could become, but you saw it in them as a leader. But if you don't have credibility and respect with your people, you're never gonna help them become the best version of themselves. So that's the first thing, is being able to listen really well, and then you have to build through action credibility and respect. That's the first thing. The second thing for me is creativity. And creativity applies to everything that we do in a field approach, because you're constantly in a situation of dealing with changing market dynamics, changing buyer behavior, changing market conditions, changing competitors, and you need to be able to assess that all the time and develop new ways of going about it. Like we're doing some prospecting here, and our enablement leader came up with a program we call it 21 double down sequence. So it's basically a set of 21 steps of reaching out through different mediums and through email, through all different approaches. But Yeah, you have to be, as a leader, you have to create some of that. You can't say, here's a sequence set of steps, team, go do that. As a leader, you need to be able to jump in and help people define those things. And then as a leader, when they go execute on it, if they're not having success, you have to be creative and figure, okay, how do we change this up? What's a new approach we can do? Because everything is constantly changing. That's what the temporal aspect of it. So you have to be able to be really creative, and you have to listen to customers too and what their needs are, because you're always solving for something. You know, it could be budget, it could be a perception, it could be timing. There's a lot of things you're solving for, and it's not just do this, do that. You have to have a really creative approach. And I think the third thing is being able to have a vision and a fortitude and be able to build confidence in your people. So you need to be able to see down the road, and you need to be able to create that vision for them. You know, for new people especially, right? They start their honeymoon for a couple weeks, whatever the case might be, but then pretty soon that honeymoon comes to an end, and they're facing a zero pipeline that they need to go build to 3 or 4 or 5x, whatever the case might be. Maybe a small pipeline, but they need to build that. And as a leader, if you have credibility and respect, you can work with creatively with them, and you can help build that vision, and you can give them the fortitude that they can go and build their business up and be able to drive it. So, you know, if you notice, I'm using the word leader, not manager, because these are leadership characteristics, not just here's what to do in the job. You know, that's management.
Right.
Do A, B, C. You know, you have a playbook and you have a run book, but as a leader, you need to bring these things together. You know, so 3 things.
Absolutely. No, and I think they're all super important. And I love the little point that you make. Just because you're a manager doesn't make you a leader. Your actions make you a leader.
Yes. Yeah. Your actions make you a leader. And I think, you know, your results will speak for themselves, but your people's results will speak for themselves. My mindset is always creating an independent, not a dependent organization. So what I mean is that the organization can run without me. People are in a spot where they can go and execute, and they know the system, they know the mindset, they know how to develop the best characteristics in themselves. So they don't need to come to me for everything. They come to me for certain things, of course, and there are certain things I'm going to lean in that I might see that they may not see. But that's what leaders can do. You have to create that leadership so they can develop and emerge. I've been fortunate. I've had a chance to work with amazing people. And some of the people I've hired as first-line leaders are now CEOs, and that's a really that's
going to be a great feeling.
I'm very privileged to have come across some people with some really amazing talent, and they trusted in me enough to join with me, and then trusted me enough to help them just develop. And a lot of times it's just working with them and being listening to them, and they develop on their own. You know, other times it's really getting in and working with them, rolling up sleeves a little bit more. But it's a really good thing. But that doesn't happen by accident. You know, that happens because you have to create an environment for that to happen, in my opinion.
Right. Well, as we both know, you know, the world is changing constantly. The market's changing constantly. So I'm a little bit curious, you know, what changes would you like to see in sales culture over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think I like that question as well. I think there are a couple things I think that I think we can change in the sales culture and the go-to-market kind of business. I think one is more professional certifications. So there are a lot of other. I mean, sales is a pretty exceptional career, and I think there's an opportunity at large to develop more personal certifications. I think the second thing is that some universities are doing this now, but there are certain sales tracks at university degrees, and I think that that's a really valid profession. You know, I think in a lot of ways sales is looked at as kind of an other profession, but the reality is it is a pretty intense profession, and people can be very successful
and so necessary.
You can learn it. So I think there's a lot that some universities can do in that, and really, you know, there's some really exceptional career tracks that people can have as professional sales folks and as professional go-to-market folks. So I think there's more on the university and education side. The third thing I'm creating on my own, which is a methodology for understanding and deconstructing subconscious conclusions that a buyer may take from their first interaction on the piece of content through their interest in the sales process, through to their purchasing process, through to their adoption and expansion and upsell. So that's something that's in the works. So we'll more on that as we go.
I will definitely be keeping my eye out for that one. But, last question, and this one's kind of a fun one. What is maybe the most creative way that you have ever closed a deal, Anthony?
Yeah, I know. I thought a bunch about this, and I want to take it a different way.
All right.
Way is less about a creative way of closing the deal, and more of a way of creating the energy behind it. So a little bit of time ago, I developed a concept this was one of the changes I was mentioning in the past year, but it's really having what I call compelled energy in the first meeting that we're having with a prospect, with a customer. And here's why. And I'll share with you the definition of it. I'll read it to you actually. But with compelled energy, it's the difference between going in with a prospect and saying, okay, let me ask you 37 questions on discovery and having a much different outcome that's a compelled energy one. And I'll share that with you in a sec. But if you think about the buyer's perspective, they're doing some research and they come in and they have limited time. They're making opportunity costs about where they spend their time and how they spend their time all the time. And they come out of that first meeting. If they come out of that first meeting with, well, I gave them a bunch of info, but I got nothing out of it, that's not really a great way to have a great sales process or a great engagement or a great dialogue or a great way to go build champions and coaches. But if you come out of it where the customer has real compelled energy, then it's a very, very different experience, both as a buyer and as a seller. So when we've been able to do transactions that were $1 million in TCV in literally, we did one in 13 days from first meeting to closed deal, because we drove amazing compelled energy in the first meeting. And the definition of compelled energy, I'll read it to you, is the engagement, emotional and logical, you heard me talk about that earlier, of the audience to take priority action in an urgent, specific, and outcome-focused way. This is typically caused by direct, respectful, clear, but problem-centered communication, demonstrated, articulated, relevant customer examples and ROI, painted picture of the possible with the confidence of a low-risk approach. When compelled energy is present, life is good and the transaction moves fast. When compelled energy is not present, everything is slow and difficult, and the transaction will likely die. So it's a different concept around how you drive a sales process, but it's the process that I've been putting in place here for the past year. And I put a definition around it, and we're teaching it. It's actually our first phase in the sales process. So
that is super exciting.
Yeah. It's less about what you're doing at the end and more about what's happening in the beginning. Because if you do those things in the beginning, you don't have to worry about closing the deal. The transaction is naturally on its own progression, and you're facilitating the process for the customer.
That's awesome. You're gonna have to send me that definition, because I think that I'm definitely gonna have to steal it and use it for our team trainings as well. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today. I just have one more question for you.
Sure.
Do you have any advice that you would like to share with our viewers? This could be personal, professional, anything that you'd like to share. I think,
the thing I'll share is that I think it's really important to have fun. And it's trite, right? But I really think it's important to have fun. And if you think about the things we've been talking about today, natural energy and knowing how to process subconsciously and really being authentic and creating respect and credibility.
Yeah.
If you need to know what is fun for you, and you need to be able to go out and have fun. And fun is not just having a celebratory party. Fun is getting in and doing some meaningful work. Fun is getting fulfilled. Fun is competing and having some good challenges, but achieving it. And you need to know what's fun for you, and then just go do it. Just enjoy the process. So that's my parting thought.
Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for all of your insights. I've loved having you here on the podcast today. And everybody, if you liked what Anthony or I had to say today, would very much encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, share this with your network. Anthony has such a wealth of information. I'm so glad he was able to share it with us today. Again, this is Nxt In Sales. I'm Anna Hagen, and I will see you next week.